presentation in the consent agenda 2.07. As I find the information important and worth discussing, I think we have a fantastic trajectory for CTE in this district, and we add more programs every year. Finding teachers for those programs has been a challenge, and licensing is not easy. My husband is a CTE instructor for business, and the hoops he had to jump through were challenging, to say the least. Hopefully, Endo can figure out a way to make the path to licensure a little more palatable, to get highly qualified people into these positions, and we can offer even more avenues to success for our students. Our CTE programs are wide-ranging. We have schools that offer such a plethora of different study paths, from automotive and HVAC to cosmetology and culinary arts. It's so much easier to get on a vocational track now than when I was in high school, and you had to attend VOTEC or ATEC before ATEC was the ATEC of today. I have a question regarding page 14 and the phrase rigorous coursework. What exactly is defined as rigorous coursework for CTE? As each course is so vastly different and taught so differently depending on what site you're at, how is that going to be standardized across the district during this monitoring session from January to August 2025? Another query I have is regarding the possibility that the state will no longer absorb the fees for CTE tests. What is the district's plan regarding testing fees if the state decides they will no longer pay for the thousands of CTE exams that are given each year? Will there be something akin to fee waivers like those given to AP students? Will the schools be expected to absorb these fees into their annual budget, or will the fees be passed on to the students for these two required exams that factor into the school star ranking? I also wanted to briefly speak about 2.17, which is the deal with Nevada Power regarding electric charging stations for our electric buses. Going forward with this needs to be passed, obviously, but we also need to consider moving toward a solar solution with Nevada Power for our schools. Consider what they did at the VA, for example, in utilizing solar for their parking. Covered parking with solar panels to power the VA hospital has helped with their energy costs and has significantly assisted in their budget. Perhaps that is something to look into when discussing energy efficiency with Nevada Power. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, colleagues, I'm looking for a motion. Trustee Guzman?
I'd like to move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Trustee Satori?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Trustee Satori. Colleagues, we have a motion by Trustee Guzman, a second by Trustee Satori. Please cast your vote. Thank you, colleagues. That motion passes 6-0. Now we're going to move on to the warrants. All right, thank you. Trustee Guzman, can you please read the warrants?
Yes, the ratified warrants is listed in the Bills Payable Transmittal and Board Memorandum Number 09-24-25 in the total amount of $241,937,229.81.
Great, thank you. Okay, colleagues. We're now going to move on to item 3.01. That's the revision of the 2025 calendar of board meetings. I, yours truly, am your contact. However, before I begin and share some remarks on this piece, I'd like to, this is an action item, and before I fully open it, is there anyone in the public who has not had a chance to submit a public speaker card? If not, please do so now. Okay. All right, colleagues, in terms of 3.01, the revision of the 2025 calendar Board of Trustees meetings, we're here this evening to discuss the proposed revision of the 2025 calendar of board meetings. The reason for the proposed revision is that the Nevada Association of School Boards, or also known as NASB, will have a legislative day on March 5th, 2025, and we'll be inviting all school board members to participate in this event. In addition, NASB will host a professional development workshop that includes new trustee orientation on March 6th. Okay. The recommendation is to move the board work session from March 5th to March 3rd. We also have confirmed with the superintendent search firm that if this recommendation is approved, that the final board work session date will work with the superintendent search timeline. In addition, if approved, the board liaison will notify the superintendent search firm of the revised meeting date and update the calendar accordingly. Also, the trustee briefings scheduled for March 6th will be rescheduled to March 4th to accommodate NASB. I'll now open up the discussion, the item for discussion and/or a motion. Forgive me, colleagues, we don't have any public comment on this item. So, Trustee Bustamante Adams.
Thank you, Madam President. I just don't want to assume, but just want to share with the team that legislative day is up in Carson City since the legislative session will be starting. So that is why the encouragement to be able to go there on legislative day on March 5th. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Trustee Zamora.
Thank you, Madam President. I have actually the great privilege of sitting on the legislative chair for NASB, and we are actually really, I hope my colleagues support this because we really hope to get you in the building. I think this upcoming session is going to be really important for us as a district to show unity more than anything across all the school boards in Nevada. So I actually want to make a motion to approve, how does that go? To approve, thank you, the revision of the 2025 calendar of board meetings.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Trustee Zamora. Trustee Bustamante Adams.
I would like to second that motion.
Great, thank you, Trustee Bustamante Adams. Colleagues, we have a motion by Trustee Zamora, a second by Trustee Bustamante Adams. Please cast your vote. Thank you, colleagues. The motion passes 6-0. We will now move on to item 3.02, the fiscal year 2025 amended final budget. This is a presentation, discussion, and possible action on adoption of the fiscal year 2025 amended final budget, including the reduction of the unassigned ending fund balance from 4.5 to 4.24%, and authorization for members of the Clark County School District Board of Trustees to file as required by NRS statutes 354.5980005 is recommended. Before I turn it over to Dr. Larson Mitchell, I do want to state that this is this is an action item, colleagues. So members of the public, if you would like to speak on this item, please submit a yellow public speaker card. Otherwise, once we get the presentation, we will no longer accept public comment cards. Okay. Dr. Larson Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. For the record, Brenda Larson Mitchell. The team is here to present the fiscal year 2025 amended final budget. You can see we have some cross collaboration here as we're working very hard to collaborate across units, divisions, and departments when it comes to the budget. So tonight we have Ms. Kelly Kowal-Paul, our Chief Strategy Officer, Ms. Diane Bartholomew, Interim Chief Financial Officer, and Ms. Gutierrez, Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. So at this point in time, with your permission, Madam President, I'll turn it over to the team.
Thank you, Dr. Larson Mitchell. Madam President, members of the board, good evening. As Dr. Larson Mitchell said, I think this might be the first time in my recollection that we've had a cross-functional team here to present on the budget. I think you can see this as a testament to Dr. Larson's leadership about establishing systems and structures that improve organizational knowledge and a broad understanding of the systems that make it possible for us to do our work for kids. I'm so happy to be a part of it. Ms. Bartholomew, Ms. Gutierrez, and I are here to present to you the 2020-25, you know what I meant, amended final budget. The presentation this evening is designed to give you an overview of that amended final budget. We'll give you some details as to the development timeline for the amended final budget and how this budget compares to the final budget which you approved in May. We'll also share with you some high-level details and comparisons as they relate to the district's general operating revenues, general operating expenditures, and including how those changes impact the budgeted unassigned ending fund balance. You've all seen this slide before, this timeline. You'll remember we shared this timeline in relation to the school budget development work we've been speaking of over the last few weeks. The school budget development milestones are listed above the month timeline on this diagram, and the major district budget development cycle milestones are listed below. To focus on the district budget development cycle, which is what we're talking about today, we've adjusted the diagram a little bit. We removed the school budget milestones from the slide and separated the current from the previous fiscal year. Our fiscal year is from July 1 through June 30th, and you can see how the two shades of blue on this diagram illustrate the transition from one fiscal year to the next. We are in fiscal year 2025, which began July 1st and will end on June 30th, 2025. Last April and May, the board approved the tentative budget and final budget, both of which were developed and approved before the beginning of the fiscal year for which the budget's represented. You can see how both the tentative and final budgets were developed based on projections for what the end of fiscal year 2024 was projected to look like before that fiscal year was completed. So each year, tentative and final budgets are built based on the completion of the fiscal year that is in progress at that time. We utilize projected revenues for the upcoming year, including revenues that are based on projected student enrollment for the upcoming school year. And we utilize projected expenditures and beginning fund balance based on an ongoing analysis of expenditures in the in-process fiscal year. But without actual enrollment, and with calculating projections based on layers of other projections, there is to be expected room for amendment of these budgets once we have actual figures. Those actual figures allow us to develop an amendment to that final budget approved in May, which is what you have before you for approval today. For the development of the amended final budget, projected expenditures can be calculated based on audited actual expenditures from fiscal year 2024, which the board just reviewed and approved last month, in fact. And projected revenues can be calculated based on actual average daily enrollment from the first quarter of the school year. So the amended final budget represents a revision to our projected revenues and expenditures for this current fiscal year. This amendment is required by Nevada law. By January 1st, we must submit this approved amendment to the Nevada Department of Taxation. And then after approval, the district will implement the amended final budget. The board will review and approve expenditures and transfers through June 30th of next year. And then we will present the audited actual information for fiscal year 2025 in November of next year. So you see how the cycle will continue. This evening, we will provide some high-level information in our presentation, but there's also detailed information available for you as reference material A on tonight's agenda, including a narrative that details the changes from tentative to final, from final to amended final budget on pages 1 through 7. Page 5 is where the new information begins for this evening for the amended final budget. Also on page 8 is a balance sheet that provides an overview of the comparison of final to the amended final budget. And then the 10 actual schedules and forms that are required to be completed, approved, and submitted to the Nevada Department of Taxation begins after that. To take us through some of those details, I will turn it over to Interim Chief Financial Officer Diane Bartholomew.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Dr. Larson Mitchell, I'm Diane Bartholomew, your interim CFO for the district. You'll notice on this slide the term general operating revenues, and then there's also general operating expenses throughout this presentation and the reference materials. General operating refers to the combination of the general fund and the special education fund, and does not include other funds of the district, such as food service or debt service or our bond funds, et cetera. For our general operating revenues, there are 4 main sources. State sources, which includes the State Education Fund, our PCFP, and special education revenue. Local sources, which include things like donations, local taxes, and interest income. Federal sources, which include federal impact aid, forest reserve monies, and Medicaid administration reimbursement, but federal sources do not include federal grants. And lastly, other financing sources includes our medium-term bond financing. You'll see that by far the largest source of general operating revenue is state sources. In fact, over 97% of general operating revenues come from state sources. The other funding sources account for the remaining 3% of general operating revenue combined. Most of that revenue is allocated through the PCF, through the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan. As you know, the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan replaced the Nevada Plan in fiscal year 2022. PCFP legislation lays out both how the state allocates funds to the districts and to some extent how districts in turn allocate the funds out to schools. The district is guided by legislation to provide a reasonably equal educational opportunity for all students. The district's PCFP allocation is determined by student enrollment, and we receive allocations quarterly based on the average daily enrollment of the prior quarter. These enrollment numbers are audited each quarter by the Nevada Department of Education. You can see the legislature's unprecedented increase in per pupil funding from $7,400 in FY23 to almost $9,500 per pupil this year for the Clark County School District. These per pupil amounts are adjusted individually for each Nevada school district. Enrollment tends to trend slightly lower year after year right now, and we consider those trends in enrollment and budgeting projections throughout the year. Over the last 10 years, total per pupil funding for general operating revenues has increased steadily, with a significant increase from the implementation of the pupil-centered funding plan and increased state revenue. On this slide, comparing the final budget to the amended final budget surfaces some of the changes necessary after closing out the FY24 budget. Interest rate changes have negatively impacted our projections for interest income, which we have reduced by $21 million, contributing to an overall reduction in projected local source revenue by nearly $26 million. We have increased projections for revenues in state and federal sources, and also need to reflect as revenue our $50 million medium-term bond, which is used to purchase buses, white fleet, and some technology that the board approved in August. Overall, we have increased revenue projections by $29 million compared to the final budget projections. Moving on to general operating expenses, which reflect how we project utilizing the resources provided by our general operating revenues. Primarily, we consider expenditures such as salaries and purchases and the accounting for the components of the ending fund balance. I will now turn the presentation over to Deputy Superintendent Melissa Gutierrez.
Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Larson Mitchell, Melissa Gutierrez, Deputy Superintendent for the record. This year's budget continues a multiple-year trend of over 80% of general operating expenses being projected for salaries and benefits. Most of those are in schools. The remaining non-salary expenditures are also centered in schools, primarily textbooks and supplies, but also utilities for schools and district facilities. We can separate general operating expenses into general fund, which you see here, and special education fund on the next slide. This data illustrates how the significant majority of funds support positions and purchases within school budgets, followed by teaching and learning, then school support units. Within the Special Education Fund, most of the expenditures are projected to support licensed and support professional positions providing instruction, support, and transportation to students with disabilities in alignment with federal law. This slide does not reflect the district's entire special education expenditure. Not included are expenditures of federal dollars received to support students with disabilities. At this time, I will turn the presentation back over to Diane Bartholomew, Interim Chief Financial Officer.
Sorry. Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Dr. Larson Mitchell, Diane Bartholomew for the record. And again, comparing the final budget to the amended final budget in terms of projected expenses surfaces some of the changes necessary after closing the FY24 budget. On the expenditure side, this includes the change necessary for unassigned ending fund balance that we have predicted and discussed with the board over the last few months. Salary increases due to finalized negotiated agreements, increased projections by $34 million. Changes to school budgets by principals impacted the supplies projections. The amended final budget includes $49 million in non-spendable prepaid expenditures to reflect the purchase of textbooks to be amortized over 7 years. And finally, you can see the $9.9 million decrease in the unassigned ending fund balance listed here as well. District Regulation 3110 requires that we maintain a minimum unassigned ending fund balance of not less than 2% of total general fund revenue. You can see that even with the 9.9 million reduction, our unassigned ending fund balance is still well above that threshold at 4.24% of general fund revenue. And I'm just going to add for clarification that it is the NAC which requires the district to budget ending fund balance no less than 4%, but it's of prior year general fund expenditure. So, and this concludes our presentation on the fiscal year 2025 amended final budget.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, I have public comment on this item. Dr. Beamel?
Good evening, Tiffany Beamel for the record. I don't envy your job. Budgeting is the worst part of being a grown-up, hands down. It's my favorite part of teaching my seniors because they freak out about how much money they actually need to survive in this world. But the reality of trying to do this budget is terrifying. And quite frankly, no thanks, hard pass. I think energy saving, cost efficiency line items could be considered as ways to help save money. You guys did a good job. Like, this is really nice. I liked it. Cutting costs that won't harm students is really important and very beneficial to the district. You have a really tough job, and I hope that when CCSD goes to Carson City to fight for budget dollars, we have a great group who will show that we can trim the fat, fight for what students actually need, and that we aren't wasting money on things that aren't necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. No more public comment on this. I'll turn it over to my colleagues for discussion, question, excuse me. Trustee Guzman?
Thank you, President Garcia Morales, and I will echo Dr. Beamel's comments. She is right. It is the toughest part of being an adult is budget. I want to ask about 388G because it mandates 8515, right? And I was looking through the budget documents, and I know that that's probably not part of this, but I know that if I, as a person who knows the community and knows how they look at our documents, they're going to look for it. So can you tell me, when looking through the documents, where they can see the 8515?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Larson Mitchell, Kelly Kowal-Paul for the record, Trustee Guzman, they will not find that distinction in these documents. The 8515 requirement sets out a separate definition of restricted, and those calculations are reported separately and available at our openbook.ccsd.net website.
Perfect. One other question has to do with the ending fund balance. Does the ending fund balance include all of the ending fund balances that are at school sites?
Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Dr. Larson Mitchell, Diane Bartholomew, for the record, this particular slide is general fund revenue. So when you talk about the entire ending fund balance, yes, that does include carryover in school budgets, yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Trustee Johnson?
Yeah, just two quick questions. You may have said this, and I might have missed it. The revenue from bond principal, how do we earn that again? I mean, I know where principal comes from, but there's a big shift between the forecast and then the actual.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Dr. Larson Mitchell, Diane Bartholomew for the record. So we go to bond every year for financing. Part of it is we do financing for our buildings, for our construction and capital projects, so that's a separate bonding, and then medium-term bonding is, and why it's medium-term is because you're using it for buses, white fleet technology, not for capital assets. So it's the same process. It's basically taking out a loan.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful.
Trustee Johnson, if I may.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon. Kelly Coelpel for the record. I just want to clarify that although this is a revision from the final budget, it's still a budget. It's still not actuals. We're still making projections.
Okay, all
Thank
right.
you.
That's helpful too. Thank you. And then the last part, I don't know, I guess this is more like a theoretical question because it's going to be like future looking. But the slide number 10, we talked about our general operating revenues, and the biggest part of that general operating revenue is going to come from student enrollment, and that, and Ms. Bartholomew mentioned that we're in a decline, and I imagine that's like an out year is also declining. So the strategy that we are going to have to, is there a strategy we have to put in place to safeguard against declining revenue with expenses that are to some degree locked in?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Larson Mitchell, Trustee Johnson, yeah, we definitely are going to have to implement some strategies there. I think where we will feel it the most is in individual school budgets, considering that's where most of the funds are and most of the services to students are being provided. However, also the central office units and departments that provide direct services to schools also have a large chunk of the budget, so the changes are disproportionately felt to those units as well. It will always be, we will always have to adjust to the population that we receive to serve. We will always serve those we receive, whoever they are and however many they are. But yes, as we go, that may require some more adjustments depending on how quickly the decline is. You can see it's pretty slight. Lately, there's a lot of global reasons beyond that. I know there's a narrative about students leaving us, but I think the biggest piece of that right now is that the birth rate changes from year to year. Our largest class just graduated. The 9th grade class coming in is much smaller. So we just see some of those kind of community-wide data points enter into this equation for us as well, and we keep an eye on it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Trustee Bustamante Adams?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Interim Superintendent. This cross-functional approach is so refreshing, and I'm so grateful. My question has to do on page 10. So I appreciate the legislature and their additional investment into the school districts. My question is on optimal funding for the per pupil. So I'm not sure if you know the number, you may, but even though we increased, we're still not at the optimal funding amount. Is that accurate? And if it is accurate, then what is it? Because I don't remember.
Madam President, members of the board, for the record, Brenda Larson Mitchell. So last weekend, attending the NASB conference, Nevada Association of School Board, there was a presentation, and they indicated that we are approximately $4,000 below the national average, if I remember correctly. Is that also the optimal level? That is not necessarily the optimal level, as Trustee Bustamante Adams asked, but that is the figure that I know where we are in comparative to the national level. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Interim Superintendent, my other question is, I know that Clark County has a seat on the Commission for School Funding, and so with change in our finance team, are we still at the table?
Madam President, members of the board, for the record, Brenda Larson Mitchell, Trustee Bustamante Adams, yes, our interim CFO is at the table for those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Esparza-Strophigan?
Thank you, team. Actually, thank you, Trustee Bustamante. We were on the same page with that question. I was going to ask that as well, so it's off my list. I want to still stay on slide 10. Asking you regarding weighted funding. So we know the categories are for ELs and for at-risk and for gifted and talented, but oftentimes the questions that I would say site-based principals that have to manage their budgets are asking they want to get more into the weeds of it. So what is it that we need to do better to help them understand what that calculation is? Because that's kind of the questions that I get most regarding that.
Madam President, members of the board, sorry, Kelly. For the record, Brenda Larson Mitchell, great question, trustee. So we are working, one of our main goals in working with principals on the school budget is transparency. And so we are building a prototype in Hyperion where they can easily see how those calculations are determined for their budget. Principals should be able to really predict their budget. And so we are building a new prototype that will have that transparency. And then we are anticipating providing professional learning for principals in mid-January when we have our principal-leveled meetings.
Thank you for that. I think I still have time. So here's the second question, and we may have to come back. I'll yield my time if I need to. What did you learn and through the cross interaction with the departments, and what will be different in the processes going forward?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Larson Mitchell, I should have looked first. I'm sorry. Trustee Esparza Stafford. I think the answer to your question is bigger than this presentation. Truly, what has become publicly available to you all and to our kind of stakeholders has been the cross-functional work related to the school budget process improvement cycle. However, even before that, we already had discussed and strategized around a way to implement, really provide the opportunity for multiple cross-functional opportunities for not only discussion, but problem solving and decision making for every district-wide district impact project or decision that we make in the district. We implemented that, I don't know, several months ago, 6 months ago maybe. It also allows for actually required checkpoints where we have cross-functional discussions about some of the things we're examining. We determine at the very beginning of the work which stakeholders need to be consulted so that we can make sure the voices of those most impacted are included from the very beginning. Specifically, there was a need in our minds to include the voices of principals. We make sure that we engage the number of principal committees we have. There's also an opportunity to engage teachers and support staff depending on what the project is. And then, of course, always making sure we're engaging in cross-functional work. I can tell you that I've been in this district for 28 years, and in that time, I think we've never had a more well-rounded, shared understanding of the work, the progress, and I guess I want to say the potential for really explosive growth that this district is at this point in time. And a lot of that has to do with that cross-functional work that we've been doing well beyond the budget work.
Wonderful, thank you. Trustee Barron?
Thank you, Madam President. Quick question. I still haven't uncovered all of the mysteries behind school finance. At the municipal level, normally like a reduction of unassigned ending fund balance, oftentimes, that results in kind of a hit to your bond rating, which, basically I'm getting at, higher interest rates. Is the district's bond capacity, bond rating actually independent, or is it tied to the counties? Number one. Number two, are we subject to any negative bond rating, I guess a bond rating depreciation in this case?
Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Dr. Larson Mitchell, Diane Bartholomew for the record, Trustee Barone, yes, in a roundabout way, our bond ratings, that is an aspect when we get rated, is our ending fund balance. Our story has a lot, there's a lot more to the story than our unassigned ending fund balance, obviously. And I think we have a strong accounting record with our ACFR that you just approved last month. So, and to answer your question, yes, it would have a small impact on our rating, but currently in my opinion, that it would be a very slight impact, if any, at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Esparza-Strophigan?
Thank you. So, curious, on page 7, we talk about federal sources at $2 million. What is going to be the impact of that no longer potentially being available in the future? Are we exploring what other revenue sources in grants and other competitive revenue that we could pursue? And I just want to know, because ESSER was a windfall, and now that we have been very creative on how we're going to fill those holes. So could you give me an update on that?
Sure. Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Larson Mitchell, Trustee Esparza-Strophigan, Kelly Kowal-Paul for the record. We share those same concerns. There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the relationship between the federal government and education finance, specifically for public education. Although I don't think that grants should be our safety net, because the vast majority of grant funding we receive also comes from the federal government. So we have teams both on the finance team and then also on the grants team who are highly engaged in relationship with the Nevada Department of Education, the United States Department of Education. Also, we have federal grants attorneys who keep our team abreast of all of the latest and upcoming kind of projections in terms of guidelines and changes from the federal government. But the bottom line is we will all have to wait and see, and we will have to adjust. As to Trustee Johnson's question, with enrollment, we will have to adjust as those changes come in, for sure. I think what we can do is assure you and our community that the responsibility that's outlined in the law to ensure a reasonably equal educational opportunity for all students is one that we already, had for ourselves, and is one that will continue no matter what kind of the size of the resources we have available are.
Thank you. I just know the importance of when people are used to having something and they no longer have it, what is the reason why? And I think we need to be proactive in our messaging. And so I appreciate the team because I feel the weight that you carry, and I know it's big. So we want to also be messengers of what we need to do to not only statewide, but even at the federal level, have some hard conversations about that. And I do have another question, but I'll yield to my colleague, Trustee Cavazos. Come back.
Trustee Cavazos?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Trustee Esparza-Strophigan. I just have well, first of all, thank you very much, and also, too, during our briefing, you guys were very patient with my questions, and so I just want to express thanks for this cross-functional perspective. It's very helpful. We did have the experience at NASB this past weekend to also have a presentation that was presented in much the same way. But I have a question from one of our student constituents who is going to be, let's see if I get his right, he's going to be studying finance at UNLV, wants to know if this cross-functional perspective, and he's listening to our meeting, is this have anything to do with, he's listening, and wants to know if that has anything to do with the silos that we had described before, where we felt like we were working in silos and people were not coming together. So he would like a little bit more elaboration on this, and he knows a lot about it.
Madam President, members of the board, that's pretty exciting.
It is pretty exciting.
I hope he comes to work with us one day.
There you go.
Kelly Kowal-Paul for the record, excuse me, Madam President. The short answer is yes. It's a direct result of not only the silos that we've shared with you about the fall school budget cycle, but also, as I was explaining earlier, to the kind of silos that we were experiencing as a leadership team, and that led us to implementing that district-wide decision-making framework. So I think the level of visibility was greater with the budget development work in the fall, but that is something that we've been wanting to work on for a long time. I think we've finally cracked the code as to how to make the best use of that system to break down some of those silos.
Right. Thank you so much. I definitely will be reaching out to you guys if he contacts us again so that we can get some more information. But that is exciting. Thank you so much.
Trustee Zamora?
Thank you, Madam President. I've learned that things have to be repetitive sometimes, and during this whole presentation, I know it's just the amended, final budget approval that's on the agenda, but I would love to just keep mentioning about SOTs and being involved in this process as we move forward. And I know you all are coming up with a plan, so I just wanted it to be out there for the folks listening, right? And I don't know if you want to add more, Kelly, because I know you've been working on that.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Larson Mitchell, Kelly Cole-Paul for the record. Trustee Zamora, yeah, SOTs are highly involved in the individual school budgets. That's something that we definitely support, regardless of whether there's a requirement or not. They're involved in that from start to finish at every school level, and all of that work is reflected in the amended final budget today.
Trustee Sparza-Strophagan?
Promise, last question. Okay. So I know that the messaging for attendance matters has been an emphasis. And so I want to look at, when we look at slide 5, the term actual average daily enrollment is based on the first quarter. I just want you to define that so that people understand the importance of our students coming to school every day, and what does that mean for, the actual schools to be able to get the funding that they need. So,
Madam President, members of the board, I'm going to phone a friend, Mr. Manzi, if that's okay, President.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Larson Mitchell, Trustee Esparza-Strophagan. So the average daily enrollment calculation is actually based on students being enrolled, not their daily attendance in schools. Separate calculation that we'd be using for that purpose.
So, as a follow-up, please, Mr. Manzi, what does that mean for a parent and their child coming to school? Like, when we know every day matters, but when does it become a dollar sign?
Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Larson Mitchell, Trustee Esparza-Strophagan, Greg Manzi for the record. So it's important every single day. So the first day of school starts counting that enrollment and contributing to that average. So being here the very first day of school and every day is important, but it's part of the enrollment. The attendance is the instruction part, and getting here to improve the learning and the outcomes.
Thank you for that, because hard conversations are being had in all spaces, but especially people making, I think, emphasizing that we need our students to be showing up regardless. And I just know that in the municipality of Henderson, there's been a reduction in their chronic absenteeism, and they are specifically having that kind of messaging that is going forward. So I appreciate the work that's been done, because it's important, because that is money. And so I think that's just something I wanted to hit with you with the terms on how to define it. Thank you for that.
Thank you, colleagues. That concludes this item. Discussion on this item. I am seeking a motion. Trustee Bustamante Adams.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to move, motion to approve the amended final budget for fiscal year 2025.
Thank you, Trustee Bustamante Adams. Trustee Cavazos.
Thank you, Madam President. I will second that motion.
Thank you. Colleagues, we have a motion by Trustee Bustamante Adams, a second by Trustee Cavazos. Please cast your vote. Thank you, colleagues. That motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Thank you. All right, colleagues, thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to item 3.03, the Compliance Monitoring Agreement. This is discussion and possible action to enter into an agreement with King Strategies LLC to provide services as a compliance monitor pursuant to the appointment of the Nevada Department of Education and for the interim superintendent of schools, Clark County School District, and the president and the Clark County School District Board of Trustees to sign the agreement is recommended. Okay, I'll now, this item is an action item, colleagues, and will require public comment. Members of the public, if you have not already submitted your public comment card and would like to speak on this item, please do so now. Otherwise, we will no longer take public comment cards once we begin the presentation. So colleagues, I'll turn it over, and I see some public comment cards coming up, so thank you for that. Okay, I'll turn it over to Dr. Larson Mitchell.
Madam President, members of the board, for the record, Brenda Larson Mitchell. Mr. Okazaki will lead us through the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Dr. Larson Mitchell. John Okazaki, General Counsel, for the record. Presented to you tonight in this item is the agreement between the Clark County School District and King Strategies LLC, which has been appointed by the Superintendent of Public Instruction to be our compliance monitor. The agreement is based on the terms that was set out by the superintendent as well as the applicable regulation. I'll point out some important terms. The first one being in Section 1, access. The regulation and the superintendent's instructions indicate that the compliance monitor shall be allowed to attend any meeting related to the reorganization and operation of the district. This includes all meetings of the Board of Trustees, any meeting of executive and cabinet members, any meeting of principals, and any meeting of interested stakeholders. So generally speaking, the compliance monitor will have access to all meetings. Except for confidential student information, we are obligated to give the compliance monitor access to all buildings, information, and resources that she needs to perform the services pursuant to the agreement. Section 2 indicates the term of the agreement is based on the cap on her compensation. So we are required to pay her $160 per hour with a cap of $60,000. So once that amount has been paid out, then the agreement will terminate. The next important section is Section 10, which are the actual services that are to be provided. The compliance monitor shall provide oversight, support, and assistance to the district regarding the corrective action plan requested by the Superintendent of Public Instruction on November 25th, 2024, its implementation, and the subsequent review and reporting of such implementation. There is one last provision I'll let you know of, and we do have a termination clause. Either party may, without cause, at any given time, if necessary, terminate the agreement. I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.
All right, I'm going to thank you very much. Before I turn it over to discussion, I am going to turn it over to public comment, and I'll start with Mr. Gonzalez. Come on up. Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. Well, what's that song from? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Brenda Larson Mitchell. For the record, my name is Ed Gonzalez. I'm a community member of the Hickey Elementary School organizational team, but I am not representing them tonight. Before I get started, I just want to thank the board members. This might be the last meeting I see them at, which is President Garcia Morales, Trustee Guzman, and our newest trustee, Trustee Jackson Hale. I'm thankful for this item. I think what we've seen, I've been very quiet on the budgetary issues. I don't like to comment on stuff until we actually go through the process and you saw the final amended budget. But I think we remember why this regulation came forward in the first place is when there's conflicts or things not following the law. We've seen in the previous superintendent and the previous CFO issues and community complaints about transparency. I'm glad to hear some of the comments that have come in from the interim superintendent about transparency into this process. I know Trustee Guzman sat on the State Board Subcommittee, and I think one of the complaints I've said is that this board or the legislature or any committee that's dealt with this has not seen a school budget. And so we've seen in the past, since it's been 8 years since this regulation was implemented before it became AB 469, is that we don't have the transparency in some parts of it. We don't have the transparency on a per pupil. You'll see different per pupils in secondary compared to elementary. And elementary gets kind of weird because each grade level of class size reduction is a little different, and then based on a 1 or 2 star as well. So we don't see that. We don't even see that in the reports. We see expenditures. So there's opportunities for transparency. There's opportunities for transparency in seeing like the average teacher salary because we have SB 231 money. How does that affect getting to that number as well? And then more importantly, my hope on this is that I do think the compliance monitor is very qualified. I mean, I've known Yolanda King for a while, ran the county manager very well, very professional. So I do appreciate that in getting into the process. But my hope is that this isn't somebody who is a former county manager looking at the bureaucracy to make sure the bureaucracy is doing the reports. It has to be bigger than that. It sounds like from the budget that we heard the presentation on the previous item that it's going in that route. But we also have to make sure that as SOTs are voting on budgets, it's transparent, they have an understanding because now they have to approve it. And so they have to have an understanding of what they're looking at too and how things are developed. And so I don't want to get too much into the process onto it, but I do definitely think we need transparency. I do appreciate Trustee Guzman anytime I'm in the room to bring up 388G, bring up the 85-15 ratio, because if you go to Open Book, you'll see two formulas. One at 95%, which the district has said this is how they believe that should be done, and one at a lower amount. So that's something that the compliance monitor could probably look at too. Like I said, it's very broad. I look forward to working in any way that I can, but I think this is a good thing besides helping build trust to help dispel some myths in the process, even some bad information that's out in the community. And with that, Madam President, thank you.
Thank you. I believe that concludes public comment on this item. We'll now turn it over to discussion and possible action. Trustee Bustamante Adams.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a question on the 4B on the compensation where it talks about reimbursement for any reasonable and necessary expenses. Will that amount come out of the 60,000 or will that amount come out? Is there a cap on that and who approves that if the independent contractor produces?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Bustamante Adams. John Okazaki, General Counsel for the record. No, that does not come out of the 60,000. We confirmed this with the Department of Education. They see that as additional and that they would have to be reasonable, things like mileage, transportation costs, things like that.
And so there is a process in place for to get approval before the expenditure is made?
The standard is reasonable, so we haven't really set in any guidelines as to what we would consider reasonable. The normal process is she would submit an invoice, and then if we believed it wasn't reasonable, we would push back.
Okay. I just hope that we keep a track of that amount. My other question has to do with section 10, and maybe not, it's actually on section 2. So the question is, what does the end look like? So when this monitoring happens, is there going to be a report to you, a report to us? What does that process look like?
Neither the regulation nor the instructions or the appointment from the superintendent had any end date. The only end date that they indicated was the cap on monetary compensation. That's not to say that they couldn't increase that cap once that cap is reached. So there's actually no indication as to when the appointment will end. I wrote the agreement so that obviously they gave us a cap of 60, so we're not going to pay more than 60 unless we're required to or you agree to. But yes, there's no indication as to when there's no end date, set end date. And she is required to produce monthly reports.
Okay, and that monthly reports will go to whom?
To the superintendent as well as us. We're supposed to be, I believe it says here's, I'm not sure if I put it in. We are required I may not have put it in here because it's not it's not her obligation, but we have an obligation based on the appointment to put her latest monthly report on the next board agenda.
Okay. Okay, and then my last question is on number 1, where it says access. So that could be including office space and equipment. So where would this office space be?
Madam President, members of the board, for the record, Brenda Larson Mitchell. We have an office ready to go for Ms. King on the 4th floor. So she will be working up there with us. As far as timelines, Trustee Bustamante Adams, we are required to have our corrective action plan sent to the state superintendent no later than 3 p.m. on Friday, December 27th, and then implementation is required by Thursday, January 9th. And as Mr. Okazaki said, monthly reporting is required to the Board of Trustees.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Esparza-Stroffigan?
Am I on? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Okazaki, for getting this so fast. It was an unexpected support that's being provided, but it's a welcome support. And I do want to reiterate and thank our interim superintendent for really bringing this openness to receiving these recommendations and bringing the level of transparency to all processes in regarding our budget. I know we're going to have further discussion, but I'd like to put a motion to approve item 3.03, compliance monitoring agreement.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Just a version, okay. I see Trustee Guzman who said me. I'm going to turn it over to her here. Trustee Guzman?
I'll second the motion so that the conversation can continue.
Thank you. Okay, great colleagues. I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Satori, who's next in the queue. Okay, got it. Got it. Okay, you're good. Thank you, Trustee Satori. Trustee Cavazos.
Thank you, Madam President, and a couple of my questions were answered too, so mine are short. Mr. Okazaki, going back to access, and I believe you know that I had asked this during the briefing. So it sounds like the compliance monitor has access to all the meetings that relate to operations, and that trustees and trustee meetings also. But I had spoken with you about possibly that if an attorney-client meeting is called between you and whoever is our attorney at the time, that they would not be, that we could make a case that the compliance monitor is not privy to that meeting.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Cavazos. John Okazaki, General Counsel for the record. That's correct. So my interpretation of the regulation and the access that's provided is to any meeting related to the reorganization and operation of the district. An attorney-client meeting between this board or any member of the board and their counsel would not, would not believe would fall into that definition. So it would be my position, and I would take the position that the compliance monitor would not be allowed to attend any attorney-client meetings.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Okazaki. And just one other short question, just kind of circling back to kind of like the end of the, what would happen at the end of this time period. So if we reach the $60,000 cap, and if there is something that the compliance monitor feels that still is not completed, we would then have to renegotiate then a further amount of money to be paid to the monitor because 60,000 is the cap.
That's correct. So, and in all candidness, there's not much negotiation here. We were directed by the superintendent to enter into an agreement with the appointed compliance monitor and to provide compensation at the rate of 160 per hour up to a cap of 60,000. So if I anticipate that if we got near that amount, the superintendent would either cancel the appointment or require us to provide extra compensation.
Okay, and I think I probably didn't word that correctly. I understood that that was basically mandated to us. I was talking about if we got to some kind, because it's kind of, there's a lot of kind of gray areas here, so to speak, that are not really clearly stated. So I was talking more about that if we reach that cap, and it's 60,000, and that is what is in the agreement, that if there is some kind of situation that comes up where they feel that they need more hours at the $160 an hour, we don't really have something in the agreement that states how we would do that.
We would have to enter into a new agreement.
Okay, all right, that's what I was with.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
No, sorry,
Sorry it
misunderstood.
takes me so long to get that.
No, I misunderstood.
Thank you.
Trustee Jackson Hale?
I was just going to echo the thoughts of the dais. I do agree that it's nice to have that additional layer of oversight. But I think going back to the question about the expenses and being reasonable, I think I would like to see a little bit detailed information in there, because I think reasonable is relative. So kind of what those expectations would look like, or some kind of pre-authorization or something, just so that it's not so open. And then I was wondering if you said that these reports would be part of maybe the board agenda. So is there a place where they're also going to be published so that the public will have that information other than just going to those board agendas or listening to the board report?
Thank you, Trustee Jackson Hale. John Okazaki, General Counsel for the record. In regard to the reports, I don't see any requirement for publication to the public. I do know that we're required to put them on the board's agenda, at which point they would become public. But other than that, I don't see any provision for us posting it. We can inquire. I don't think it's prohibited. I don't see any requirement on our part. As far as the reasonable expenses, I would ask this board to allow the contract as written to go forward. We are obligated to get this done by today. I was following the appointment instructions, the directions from the superintendent. I don't know if I would have the ability to mandate any further detail above and beyond reasonable. This is a contract with Yolanda King from King Strategies LLC, and I did speak with her personally about these terms, and she understands the expectation that, or the requirement that all expenses be reasonable. So I would ask the board to trust that we will monitor that. We will make a fair assessment as to the reasonableness of the expenses, and we'll push back if necessary.
Trustee Barron?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam President. I, for one, I think we're actually in pretty good company to have a person, a figure such as Yolanda King, with her deep understanding of public policy, and of course, moving a budget that is very much within the range that this board also moves, right? I just have a question with access. Will Ms. King's access to information, will it only be dictated by the terms of our agreement? Or like, if she needs to see some financials, will she have, will that be dictated by, will she have to go through our interim superintendent, or maybe later on, maybe the permanent superintendent? Or will she will she have the ability to actually access staff and or data that is, I guess, held within the district?
Thank you, Trustee Barone. John Okazaki, General Counsel for the record. Again, the language or the term used by the regulation, as well as the superintendent's appointment, refers to access to all buildings, information, and resources. We have interpreted that as being that she will have access to any information she wants. The only limitation that we put on her is that I asked her this too. I said, if we are going to release student confidential information, we are going to have a lot more provision in here in regards to the release of that type of data. And she said, I don't think I need it. Yeah. So she's not going to get down to that level of needing personally identifiable information from students. She said if we get to that point, we can negotiate it and talk about it and do an addendum. But at this point, it would be I don't want to say public because it's more than public. She is, the way I look at this, she has been appointed to be part of our organization, and she's giving the same access that anybody in our organization would have.
I asked because, of course, there've been times when I've asked for information, only to be told that I have to go through the superintendent. So for the record, she will actually not have to go and get any authorization from anybody else, that she can drill down and get the information that she needs to fulfill her mandate, correct?
My understanding of that, Trustee Barone, is that you actually have policies in place that dictate the way trustees are able to access information from staff that would not apply to her.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. I have a question before I turn it over to vote, or a couple questions. I recognize that item is mandated support by the state superintendent. Grateful for any support that comes our way. I am curious about the requirements that the district utilizes for vendors, consultants, contractors. What requirements, if any, will be requested of this consultant?
Thank you, President Garcia Morales. John Ogazaki, General Counsel for the record. I did include provisions that I believe we could impose with the understanding of what the appointment meant based on the language of the regulations. So for example, I indicated here that she may not have any access to students unless she's background. So things like that. So there are provisions in there, no insurance. So with a vendor that's just a third party, we require a lot more than we required of the compliance monitor. Again, I viewed this as, a mandatory employee. We have been given an employee who has been put into our organization to help us, and so I treated her similarly. The only things that I really protected were student confidential information, access to students, not allowed to have any direct contact with students because she's not background through our system anyway. So I did put in those provisions.
Thank you for that, and I recognize that our hands, we're limited in what we can request, but they do need the public to know that, organizations that we work with, we partner with, and in this case, this is a partnership that's being brought to us as an opportunity to gain support. From our partners, we request liability insurance. If we pay them, there is licensing required, like you must have a license of some sort. I've gone on to Silver Fume to seek for King Strategies. I don't see an LLC on file here, so this is just something to be mindful of when there are demands that seem to be more politically driven. There are bypass systems that are bypassed that don't typically apply to the entire district at large, when there are other groups who work with us and have very rigid requirements to support the work of the district. Even our employees have certain requirements to meet. So just want to lift that up for the community as this is brought before the board. And of course, something to consider to ensure that risk and liability is limited. Okay, great, colleagues. Let's go ahead and take a motion. I'd like to go back to the motion that was made by Trustee Esparza-Strophican and second by Trustee Guzman, excuse me. Please cast your vote. Thank you, colleagues. That motion passes 6-0. Thank you, council. All right, colleagues, I'm now going to move on to item 4.01. That is the public comment on items not listed as action items on the agenda. All right. We'll begin with the individuals, forgive me, protocol. If there is members of the public who have not had a chance to submit their yellow public speaker cards, please do so now. Otherwise, we'll begin with the individuals who signed up in advance. Is Deborah Moffett here, and Dr. Beamel will be next. Deborah, come on up, please.
And Dr. Beamel, if you wanted to come over here, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you. Let's use both microphones, please. Help us be efficient with our public commenters. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you guys for having me tonight. I'm here. Okay. Thank you. I didn't want to be here tonight, but I'm here because my daughter is an 8th grade student that has been bullied for the last 2 years. It got to the point to where her life was threatened on social media, where a little girl said that she was going to kill her, take her life. Sent her a video of her mom, her dad, her stepbrothers and sisters, all over the age of 20 years old, beating up another 12-year-old student, and said my daughter was next. I went to the school, spoke to the assistant principal every day. I work in Boulder City, but I live out by the Speedway. Every day I'm at the school. My daughter is locked in her room, don't want to come out, don't want to go to school. I found out because my daughter was bullied by a teacher to participate in PE activities. She has a long list of allergies. I have 10 pages of allergies. The allergy created her to have a chest wall abscess, and we still not sure if she might have to have surgery where they open up her chest. I sat down with officials December the 2nd, and I found out that this student's mom was showing up to bus stops with a loaded firearm, looking and seeking my daughter out to take her life. And then I have it all on recording. I have the text messages from the little girl posting. I have the video that was sent to me of this child and her parents beating up another student. And I was told, don't worry about it. Your child will be protected. And I asked them, how is that she's going to be protected? She don't want to go to school. Every day that she come here, she's being bullied by this little girl. And they were pacifying the child, allowing her to come to school. And they told me she don't have a phone. She don't have a phone. But then I have a recording from school officials that were telling me all the stuff that was going on that they did not tell me about. And I'm encouraging my daughter to go to school to get an education. And she's coming home every day saying, I'm not safe there. And then I'm calling. She was locked in a bathroom. 5 kids wanted to jump her. You know what they did? They gave her lunch detention. And I asked them why. They said, because we couldn't find out which bathroom she was in. This has been going on for 2 years. I have text messages. I've asked for incident reports. They will not give them to me. Filed a report with North Las Vegas Police Department. They said nothing is going to be done. I trusted school officials that they were going to do something. They've lied for a whole year and told me that the situation was taken care of. December the 2nd, when I sat down, they sat across from me and they talked about it as if it was a joke. That for a whole year, my daughter was going to school with grown adults seeking her out at bus stops with loaded firearms. They were coming on campus, and when I asked them, is there something that could be done? They told me it's not my business. That it's not my business. So that's why I'm here tonight. And I got a call yesterday from another school official.
Deborah, thank you for coming up to provide us public comment. I'm really sorry to hear that you're experiencing this challenge with your sweet human. Unfortunately, we're not able to have a discussion about this in this particular item, but I know the superintendent is already talking to their staff so that they can speak to you after this comment. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming down. Dr. Beamel?
I'm okay. I'll just lean.
Dr. Beamel, give me just 1 second. You can
want
come
me to
over.
sit?
No,
Yeah,
you can come on over. Come on over here. I see you dancing with the chair. No need to dance. After
It's
Dr.
just
Beamel.
awkward. I'm always here.
Thank you. Jessica Jones, you'll be up next, please. And come sit in the chair, Jessica.
Make me change things. I'm a creature of habit. I'm a Virgo. I can't help it. All right, sorry. Tiffany Beamel for the record. It's the end of the second quarter. Any teacher in this district will tell you that they are inundated with requests on how to bring grades up because students are in a panic over grades, of course, because it's the end of the quarter. Once upon a time, my grades were 55% summative and 45% formative because my formative assignments led up to my summative assessments, and students could find success on summatives by actually doing the formatives. Now, with the 90-10 split, students forego doing the formatives in favor of the summatives because they don't see the need to do the formatives. When they fail the summatives, they get the chance to redo them. There's no skin in the game to try because they just keep making the same errors without learning the material and hope they can guess well enough to get passing grades. This is not how it should work, and research shows that formative assignments help students to learn the skills required to find success on summative assessments. Most teachers go to school for years to learn how to be teachers. The whole idea behind pedagogy, the method and practice of teaching, is that we are professionals and we know our profession. I would never walk into my doctor's office and pretend I know how to diagnose my ailments. I wouldn't go into my mechanic and tell them how to fix my transmission. They are professionals and they went to school to learn how to do what they do. Yet when it comes to teaching, everyone else seems to know how to do it better than the licensed professionals in the classroom. Why is that? I can tell you that in my 20 years of doing this job, the worst pedagogical direction my classroom has taken is with regard to grade reform. Minimum F did not help students succeed. 90-10 has not helped encourage students to do better on summative assessments. This is not mirroring college, career, or anything else in the real world. We don't see these types of models in practice outside of the classroom, so why are we doing this to our students? Testing anxiety is up, apathy is up, grades and comprehension are down. We need to do something and do something quickly because we have entire grade levels in schools that are failing and credit deficient. We have an entire generation of students who are reading below grade level. We have apathetic kids who get so far in the hole due to 1 or 2 summative assessments that they stop caring and become behavior issues to deflect their frustrations at their grades and lack of understanding. When I originally inquired about standardized grade reform, I was told it was because there were too many teachers not towing the line and doing their own thing. How about addressing those teachers who are not meeting the needs of their students and allowing the ones doing what they're supposed to do it correctly? Why punish the masses for the few? Don't we stress differentiation? Don't we push for inclusion? Grade reform and this standardized grading policy is neither of those. Thank you.
After Jessica, we have Kristen and Jiro.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Larson Mitchell. For the record, my name is Jessica Jones. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Hickey Elementary School, which is on the east side of Las Vegas. I also serve as the secretary of the Clark County Education Association. So educators and students are about to complete the first semester of this school year. Most schools have finished or are wrapping up our winter MAP benchmark testing for reading and math. As CCSD students and educators move past December and into the second half of this school year, come February, the Nevada legislature will be meeting once more for session. Our governor and our state legislature heavily invested in public education and gave CCSD the most money it ever received in 2023. But our student achievement hasn't grown. Accountability and improving student achievement in reading and math will be a main focus of our elected leaders during this upcoming legislative session. In the last session, CCA worked closely with our legislators and the governor to secure significant funding in education because one of the goals of our organization and our membership has been to improve education for students in CCSD schools. So this February, CCA will be moving legislation that continues the work of improving education and advancing student achievement for students in CCSD with a focus on accountability. Our elected leaders, educators, and this board all want to see students succeed and perform well because we all care about our students. Last month, I spoke to this board about student achievement and how our vulnerable student populations, which include our English language learners, our special education students, and Title I students had stagnant growth from previous years. And we're only 16%, 15%, and 32% proficient in reading. This board needs to be forward-thinking because our leaders will be having these conversations during the session. The primary focus of the returning board and the new incoming trustees needs to be on advancing student achievement in reading and math. Thank you.
After Kristen, we'll have Nicole Beer.
Okay, good evening, trustees, members of the board. My name is Krista Nigro. I'm a strategist at Rexbell Elementary, as well as an executive board member for the Clark County Education Association. So I just wanted to touch base as we prepare for the upcoming legislative session. I really want to take a moment to reflect on the importance of what lies ahead for us. This is not just about policies or budgets, it's about the future of education here in the state of Nevada, and most importantly, the lives of the students we serve every single day, which we know they are the most important ones in our district. Nevada's education system faces challenges that we cannot ignore. We must work together with everyone, including lawmakers, to ensure that we're doing everything possible to make our schools better. There's lots of room for improvement, and I know we can do better. As someone that works with students in the urban core, I see firsthand every single day the immense potential our kiddos have. They are not only bright, but they're talented and full of hope, and they are really counting on us. Counting us to deliver the resources, the support, and the innovative strategies that will ensure they receive the quality education they deserve. Our students' future depends on our decisions as well as the decisions of the lawmakers. When we advocate as a united front, and I'm going to repeat the words united front, that's so important, we can push for policies that prioritize equity and access as well as raising student achievement across the state of Nevada, regardless of our students' zip code. And that is so important for these kids. They deserve the world. The road ahead may not be easy, but our students are worth every ounce of effort. Together we can make a difference, not just for our schools, but for the communities they serve and the future of our great state. Thank you.
Nicole, followed by Mr. Gomez.
Respectfully, Dr. Brenda Larson Mitchell, we are 4,200 behind the national average. And despite what special interest groups and the legislators will let you know, that is actually worse than we were in 2018. We were only 4,000 behind the national average at that time. So I come before you today to make sure that Trustee Jackson Hale, Audit Board Member Chris G., and the Review Journal remember who they so graciously added into the accolades of keeping Lundy Elementary open, soon to be Trustee Lydia. What short memories some of you have, let me remind you who this woman is. This is a woman who has rarely, if ever, attended school board meetings except for right before the election. You may remember she came in booty shorts and a ball cap. This is a radical right Christian nationalist who believes that diversity in children's literature should be banned and that Project 2025 is a great idea. Project 2025 seeks to put everybody on that dais and every school librarian in this district in jail for child pornography. Upon release from our federal prison sentences, we would register as national sex offenders. See, you want to believe that I spout hyperbole because believing that the public elected someone with these values is unconscionable. I say a great deal of things in front of you, but one thing I don't do is lie. Look it up, do the research. I believe that I recognize my white privilege as a Greek American. My ancestors are colonizer on these native lands. I'm committed to amplifying historic disadvantaged voices. I'm committed to stepping back and letting those impacted take center stage. However, once again, here I am, a white colonizer woman, reminding a group of mostly historically disenfranchised trustees, this woman is not our advocate. She is an enemy of public education. She is an enemy of diversity and inclusion, and she is an enemy of queer people. Shame on those of you for guiding her supposed journey to the mainstream and show her grace and inclusion. You appear smarter than that, but clearly you're not. Thank you for those who have not been fooled by her newfound fake tolerance. The alignment to get Brenda Larson Mitchell out has already started, but know this, I see you and none of y'all are slick. Thank you.
Mr. Gomez?
David Gomez, for the record, Nevada Peace Alliance president. I just wanted to bring up some things. We have some people in our district that are starting fight with people like Tracy Lewis, and I'm not going to mention who, but they're starting fights. Tracy Lewis's mother had been here for a very long time because I was with Marzette Lewis all the way to the end, even when I went to the funeral. And, you know, these people are we call carpetbaggers or coattail riders, things like that, and they're coming in and they're bullying people into doing what they want to do. And I don't like that. But, you know, we're going to handle that a different way and a different day because I don't want to mention names up here about those type of situations because I have another topic and subject in which I would need to talk about. November is National Nevadan or National Native American Month. And our neighboring state, Gavin Newsom, the mayor or the governor over there, gave it a proclamation for that day. I went out and I fought for our very own chief of police, Chief Black Eye. I'm pretty sure that all of you guys received an email from someone stating that we have a proclamation for him. We wanted to honor him. But nobody, not one, sent an email back saying, yes, I'll do it, or no, I will not do it. I didn't get an email. I'm the one that requested it, so you didn't get it to me. These are the same people that walk you outside. These are the same people that protect our children. This is the same man that instructs his officers to be there for you. How about just because you weren't there for him, how about this? He not be there for you. His guys not be there for you. He just whispers in their ear and say, you know what? This is not important. That's their problem, their topic. You won't even honor the first Native American off of the reservation to ever come, a chief of police in Clark County and our own school district. You wouldn't do it. The only people in this district that wanted to do it was Brenda Larson Mitchell and Brad Keating. They wanted to do it. They wanted to be there. They wanted to figure it out. I have family. I have Thanksgiving. I have everything else just like you. But you know what? I saw what was more important. I saw that honoring a man that protects our children and protects you when you walk out there or any boardroom you guys conduct anywhere, he does that and he makes sure his guys are doing that while they're sitting in here undercovered and everything else. But yet, you want to sit there and say, we love the police, but you will not honor one man who is the first Native American to come off the reservation to become chief of police in Clark County, 100% Shoshone Indian. Yet, I got to go through different channels to get help. Board of Trustee Secretary said, Mr. Gomez, I did my job and I sent it out to them. You don't care? Obviously, I think that they shouldn't care about you either. Thank you.
Sarah Comro?
Sarah Comro for the record. I was writing up something to say, but these board meetings used to go a lot longer, and I didn't have as much time as I thought. I have 3 children, as many of you up on the dais are acquainted with. My oldest son, Kenneth, is funny, kind, and an intelligent young man. He is autistic, and while academically advanced, he struggles with things like social interactions and, more importantly, safety and community awareness. He is currently a freshman in high school, and in August of his 8th grade year, I contacted the special education department at his middle school to start talking about busing, because his middle school is like, I can see it from my front porch, but his high school would presumably be further, and it is. We said we needed curb-to-curb busing. That was the agreement that the special education team, his IEP team, including myself, agreed upon. And we had to fight for about 6 months with transportation here. There was help from higher-ups in the district to try and get it pushed through, but transportation kept fighting back, and we got it. And I wish I could say that was the end of our struggles. But in August alone, there were 14 days of school that he was late, that he either arrived to school right before the bell rang to go to class and wasn't able to have breakfast, or he was 5, 10, or even 30 minutes late to his pre-AP biology class. Every day matters, right? Every minute matters, especially when your child has an IEP with minutes that are required by federal law. And he is missing them. We started in August of this school year to get him late bus so that he could belong to clubs, so that he could go to tutoring because he needs extra help. And it took 4 months of fighting. The district ignoring us, going back and forth, sending us to the school sending us back to the district. Last Thursday was his first late bus, and it was supposed to arrive at 4:16. And at 4:35, when he was supposed to arrive home by 4:49, I called transportation and they said, oh, she's 4 minutes away. But the app said still looking for the bus. Today was the second day because he only gets late bus on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And today, when I called at 4:15 because it said that they were still looking for the bus, and my son was there and there was no bus, They said they'll call the bus driver. They called the bus driver. The bus driver was at home because there was a miscommunication, and my son was standing in 54-degree weather this afternoon waiting for a bus that wasn't going to come.
Thank you, Sarah, for your public comment. I know our team is already going to look for you to continue discussing your concerns. Appreciate you. Okay. Thank you. All right, colleagues. All right, colleagues, that concludes public comment. I'm going to turn it over. Two things before, let's see, I'm going to make the announcement of our next meeting, and then I'm going to pause and take a moment here as we wind down our last meeting. Upcoming meeting of the Board of Trustees is Monday, January 6th at 5:30 p.m. here in the boardroom. I'm going to now turn it over to Trustee Bustamante Adams, and love to hear from members why am I having such a hard time saying this? Words come out. I'd like to give the members who are not returning to the board in January to share a few remarks too. Trustee Bustamante Adams, please.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted the public to know that previously, before we had our board meeting, we were fortunate and privileged to be able to honor and thank the exiting trustees. Since today is our last meeting of the year. And so for me, it was very personal, very heartwarming to express our gratitude, especially for serving their term. We were able to also have the staff included, and also we were able to honor our trustee that came in for 2 months and took the courage to be able to serve. And so we expressed our gratitude, and so I do want to thank our board president, also Lisa Guzman and Ms. Jackson Hill for your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, those kind words. Trustee Guzman, is it okay if I allow Trustee Jackson Hill to go first? Sure. Share a few remarks? Yeah. Trustee Jackson Hill?
So I just want to say thank you for allowing me to serve in this capacity. I did promise to hit the ground running when I took this seat, and that's exactly what I did. Definitely working on Lundy. This is not the end for me. This is just the beginning. I definitely will be watching some of the issues that are facing the district. Like I said, I do have 3 children that are still in the district between high school and middle school. So it doesn't go unnoticed or unheard how the potential makeup of the board could change. And with the new incoming political climate, definitely, I know that there's possibly a lot of changes afoot, and I will be watching those things and keeping an eye on those things. And I think that it's important to note that we do have some oversight that's coming in the new year, which I think will be very important for the transparency of the operation of the district and then also the board moving forward. So I want to thank everyone up here that supported me in my position. I'm very grateful for people that kind of walked me through and held my hand, and that will definitely not go unnoticed. Thank you.
We can clap. Let's give her a round of applause here. Okay. Trustee Guzman?
Thank you, President Garcia Morales. And that's the last time I will say that, which is kind of bittersweet. I want to thank my community for electing me to this role. And I want to also make a point of thanking ESEA and the Teamsters because they are the ones that asked me to run for this position. And I have learned so much by being a school board trustee, from COVID masks to now books in libraries. I have learned it all, and I want to thank my colleagues for supporting me. This has been a journey, and that I will forever be grateful for. But the most important people I want to thank is my family, because through CCEA turning me into the ethics committee, to CCEA bullying me, to death threats during COVID, I lived through it all, baby. My family has been there for me. They really and truly have. And we have a lot of healing to do right now, and we're going to do that. I also want to thank the CCSD staff. I know that I make jokes and things like that, but you guys are amazing. And just remember that when you're sitting up here and public comment is over here, that Dr. Mansell holds himself very straight. If you all do that, you can get through it all, because that's what I've been doing. So thank you, everyone. And when you see me in the grocery store, because I know my community looks for me, please say hi, because I appreciate my time, and I would love it if you guys said hi to me. Thanks.
She said other people could say hi to her, but I asked her if I could say hi to her. She said, I don't know. But I know I will be able to say hi to you. Yes. Thank you, Trustee Guzman, and thank you, Trustee Jackson Hill. I'm incredibly filled with gratitude, deep gratitude for the opportunity to have served our students, families, and educators during some of the most transformative periods in education. It's really been an honor and a privilege to be part of the Clark County School District, a district that embodies resilience, possibility, and hope. And I carry with me a deep, 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 deep appreciation for this role, the role of the superintendent, and the role of staff, and its impact it has when it works together. I know, I leave knowing with certainty that progress is possible and that our students, our future, ultimately are worth every ounce of effort. It is the greatest privilege. Thank you. Thank you for the privilege to serve. All right, colleagues. Trustee Guzman, I am going to ask you to please make the last motion of your board meeting. And Trustee Jackson Hill, if you would like to make a second, I would appreciate that. Trustee Guzman.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Trustee Guzman. Trustee Jackson Hill.
I'd like to second that motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Trustee Jackson Hill. Colleagues, we have a motion by Trustee Guzman, a second by Trustee Jackson Hill. Please cast your vote. Thank you, colleagues. That motion passes 6-0. The time is 6:42 p.m. Thank you. Have a great evening.